This is a solemn day. I've been going for a while now. Kabunam Nogoha. Thank you to my returning viewers. I really want to get into it, and I've been here recently. So, for the new people, I'll just give you 4 facts. One, and I'll be moving my camera as I do this. My government name is Chimoge Chijoke Ibe. That last name is spelled I-B-E. Look it up. Two, I was born in Southeast Washington, D.C. And that's relevant because the crime I'm talking about took place in what is considered the greater D.C. area, at least to my estimation. I should have looked it up between here and the last live I just did on Chimoge's comments, but I'm pretty sure someone comment and just verify for me. I'm pretty sure Fairfax County is considered the DC metropolitan area. If not, it's just outside. But nonetheless, Virginia is next to DC, and this was a politician in the area. It took place in the area, so it is what it is. Again, for context, I was born in DC. But I grew up, my childhood home was in Maryland, so I'm more familiar with local geography in Maryland than Virginia. And I'm better at world geography and just large, I don't know what else to call it in English. I'll just say broad scale geography than local geography. My local geography is not the best, but I know where I'm going when I'm moving. It is what it is. Anyway, but I'm just saying that for context. Anyway, third fact, and let me stand. My astrological sun sign is Capricorn. My astrological sun sign is Capricorn. You can look up those traits to help yourself understand them. And then fourth, my favorite sport is soccer. And really, saying that really minimizes it because deeper than that. That's a calling. But that's something to know about me. Anyway, let's get into it. Ugh, I need a tissue. I want to change my angle. What do the ancestors say? Alright, they say keep it. I have extra papers here, but I want to see if I can start afresh. Give me a second. I'm breaking down this issue, and I'm gonna do it based upon what has been seen here physically. But in light of just being a well-rounded person, I also want to speak a bit to the spiritual aspect. I don't want to say too much so I don't speak out of turn, so I'm not reckless. And again, I'm not the personal victim of this crime. It's one thing if the personal victim of a crime says, I believe certain spiritual factors are at play, but it's something else if someone distant says that. And I'll leave it at that. But I just want to say, anytime you see a crime of that nature, um, you have to take into account the possibility of someone um, who has a problem that manifests primarily first. And I say first because after a while it'll show itself physically. And that's what I'm getting at here. But you always have the possibility of someone who has a problem that would manifest primarily first on the spiritual side. Again, I don't want to say too much, but it's common knowledge that sometimes people might have any range of things that might be called a spiritual debt. Now, just so that I'm not misinterpreted here, I don't want to go into detail about what that might be. But if you look over, um, my past work and also do your own research and think, you might understand what I'm getting at. But again, there's so many things that could possibly be at play. I'm just saying that because no one else has given reports of anything going on the spiritual side, and really that's just a result of secularism in the society today. I don't think the research has been done. I don't really have anything I can appropriately comment, and I'll leave it at that. Let me move. Now, take my comments just now for what you will. Um, but I want to add something. What I'm talking about in terms of spiritual debt is not what I'm going to just say now in terms of someone being overtaken by evil spirits. That's something else. Let me move. So, again, I just want to say this. Anytime someone commits a crime, evil spirits have played a role somehow. The exact role I can't know just by looking at the written report of the crime. Obviously, first I'd have to hear from my spiritual sources, as in my ancestors, my relatives who passed away, and any other spirits they've cleared to talk to me. And then, really, a lot of spiritual research would need to be done. But you know, it's not possible for someone to commit a crime and not have been influenced by an evil spirit somehow. And I'll just say two things about that. One, Ekwensi, which is a name for demon in my language, can be translated also as basically a bad idea or evil idea. Literally, an Nshi Atumatu. Committing a crime in this world is an evil idea. Our thoughts are spirits. So if that kind of spirit is in you, you've been overtaken by an evil spirit. Two, unless there are reports that he was so ill, or unless there are reports, let me depersonalize it. Unless there are reports that the person who committed the crime was so ill that they were confused to the point they didn't know what was happening, they are still primarily responsible for what happened. And I'll leave it at that. And because of the seriousness of this crime and the fact that there's no suggestion that he was confused, again, I think investigations are ongoing, but because there's no suggestion that he was confused or ill to the point of not knowing what was going on in the moment, and I just want to note that kind of thing can be a temporary illness. So I don't want to, stigmatize anyone who's had an experience with that. That's not necessarily your fault. But because that's not the suggestion, I don't want people to think that me talking about, evil spirits overtaking people is abdicating responsibility from criminals, and certainly not abdicating, you know, former LT Governor F's, as I'm going to refer to him, responsibility in this matter. Let me move. And again, I want to leave it at that. That's a very delicate subject, but I just don't want to be misconstrued. Um, and with everything I say, I'm gonna add in potential spiritual aspects as appropriate, but I just wanted to clear the air about that. Anyway, let's go into this. Okay, so I want to break down this crime. Um, right now, I have two different stacks of paper in front of me. I combine them, I uncombine them. As I'm saying this, it occurs to me what I'm doing is kind of like card reading, but I'm not an expert in that yet. I can't say what the full significance of this is. What do the ancestors say? They say I can't speak it yet. Anyway, um, excuse me. Give me a second. Kabrunam Nogoha. Kabrunam Nogoha. Abu Madu. Anyway, let's start with this stack of paper. Because this is my right hand, you see it as you see it. This is my dominant hand. This is my left hand, my non-dominant hand, you see it as you see it. As I prefer to call them, Neptune and Nabe. At least one thing I prefer to call them. Let's start with this sheet, which is not as thick. Let's talk about, because I like to go broad before I go specific. Let's talk about systemic issues that I see, and the language I'm going to use that I see might have enabled, and I'll say might have enabled because I don't know everything, might have enabled, the criminal here. And I'm just going to write the word Neptune. Just to strengthen myself in this moment, I want to talk about my life form. You can also call it how do you translate it? The way of my being, my uzibu. Abu Monishi Kalakan. I'm the head of the God of Thunder. What does that mean? Does that mean I'm like God, literally controlling everything the God of Thunder does? No, not possible. It means my being is 100% that of the God of Thunder. What does that mean? I'm big, and I'm using that bigness here to try and do something good. Let's go. I see too much God out here. Again, you all know me. My goal on Inquiry is for me to explain myself less, because one of the points of this network is to show myself in a way that people who instantly get me will get me. It's just because I know how different I am, both in general and especially in society today, I've developed a habit of explaining myself. That, and quite frankly, because of being around many evil people and having to fight them constantly. But I'm trying to work out of that. So just please, in the comments, either on this live or in the comment section, leave any questions you might have, and I'll try and answer them on Chimoge's comments. I think that's the procedure from now on. Let me walk. Abu Mamadiyo Hamadiyo Hakaka Abu Mamadiyo Hakaria Abu Melu Karianu One Gates Abu Mamadiyo Abu Mamadiyo He Hey Ho Ha He Hey Ho Abu He Hey Ho Ha Ha Ho He Hey Ho Abu He Hey Ho He Hey Ho He Hey Ho Abu Mamadiyo Hamadiyo Hey Ho Ha Abu Mamadiyo Hamadiyo Hanime Yanuwa Abu Mamadiyo Hamadiyo Ba Abu Mamadiyo Haniwa Ya Abu Mamadiyo Hahi Ha Abu Mamadiyo Hanuwa Ya Abu Mamadiyo Hawakaka Abu Mamadiyo Hababe Abu Mamadiyo Hakamaza Abu Monishi Amadiyo Hakuzufu Bia Oza Abu Neptune, God of the sea. Abu Neptune, you see me. Abu Moni Zembu, Anime Zembu. Abu Ram on a Bia Oza Abu Romelu, Abu Romelu. Abu Romelu, Abu Romelu, Abu Romelu, Abu Romelu, Abu Romelu, Abu Romelu. I remain ever. Abu Mefo, Abu Mefo, Abu Mefo, Efo Nuwa, Abu Mefo Nuwan Keita, Neptune. Anyway, I'm the place of my birth. Let's go. Kabunam Nogo Ha. Abume bere, 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 neju, ebere neju, obu ihaju, hapu edu ebere n'ime ya, ebere bụ nwanyị ọ chọrọ bako, nwanyị chọrọ uzuku, nwe abume bere bere bọbọbọbe, abume bere kwanu n'ụwa nka, kara abum di ebere n'ụwa, abumenu ebere bọbe. Enu ebere bụ amadioha, enu ebere bụ okikeka, enu ebere bụ siseisa, enu ebere bụ ibe ya. Okay. What systemic issues gave him an excuse to act as he was acting? And that's the language I'm using. Okay. Let's see. Abume bere bere bo 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 be. Abume bere bere bo bo be. Abume bere me me ya. Abume bere ne ka ka ka. Abume bere ke ka ke ka. Ke ka ke abume ma diwa. Anya ni go neva. Anya wabumya wabumanya 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 wabumanya. Okay, the number one systemic issue I see that gave him an excuse is what I will call, for now, the systemic race to become God. I've talked about it before. I just want to reaffirm that God is an evil entity. Another name for God is the tyrant. And I'll leave it at that. How can one person do everything and everything? How can one person be everyone's boss? How can one person have no boss themselves but be everyone's boss? How can one person have no equal in every area? How can one person have everyone as their subordinate and then want to engage in relationships with them? That's abuse. No way. Not possible. I'm just gonna put race to become God. And I'll return to that, but I already have in mind at least one way in which I'm going to highlight it that. Because for each one of these issues, because this is all going to go into, will it be a study? What else do I do with these legs I create? I'm just going to call this a bear. I'm just going to cry out. I'm just going to start crying out about these four issues. Let's go. Abuma Mario, Abuma Mario, Abuma Mario, Abuma Mario, Kabuma Mario, Kakabuma Mario, Kabuma Mario, Kakabuma Mario, Abuma Mario, Kakabuma Mario, Mario. Each of these four things are going to be two specific points I'm going to focus and cry on, and then whatever else happens, happens. So we have the race to become God. I'll come back to it with the explanation. What next? I'm going to leave the leg, because this is how I've divided it up. This is how I've divided it up. Yes. Agua. Kamhajoku. Abumamadioha. Yes. Let's leave the leg. Let's talk about money troubles. But how do I better articulate that? Let's call it systemic financial nonsense. Let's put that in black, and let's put that in the Ekwensu. And let me go into the financial nonsense. I'm talking systemic now. Let's go 1. People hold on to money for too long. You see, the world of money is a world of hot potato. Every dollar that comes into being is meant to satisfy a need in that moment. And that is not short-termism. If you get more than you need, there's someone else's need you're meant to meet. If you meet someone else's need, they should be bound to you that much more. If you get 1 million, take 50K for yourself for the year. You know what I mean, metaphorically. Give the rest to people in need. And then you got a dozen. I'm moving. Systemic financial nonsense. And again, everyone should adjust to their own need, okay? The moment is not just this second. I never said the moment is just this second. But at the same time, your whole life is not the moment. Let's go. So that's systemic financial nonsense. And I'll just say that is characteristic of the devil. Both of them. Second area of financial nonsense, and this touches many things. People only have one job. And let me just put it like that. At the same time, I just have to say this. I'm not an advocate of people having too many quote unquote jobs. So don't tell me I'm telling you to run from one building to the other in the same day and get abused. That's not what I'm saying. But there's no person who's only interested in one thing. So how can you only have one job? That's systemic financial nonsense. And when I get specific, I'll talk about how I see these systemic issues playing out here in more detail. Yes. You shouldn't overwrite. Writing is divination. Yes. Should I begin? No, I don't think I'm supposed to do that. You see, this is the beginning of my divination. Every divination ends in what we call soccer. You see, soccer is the whole process, though. What we call soccer, that's what's known as evolution. That's the goal of soccer. Okay? And, of course, within the goal of soccer, you're supposed to put it in the goal. But anyway, the left hand is itching. At you. What does that mean? I'm really thinking of just going hush and shushing the devil, but that doesn't mean this is the time to do it. Yes, if you're gonna defeat the devil, you have to strike at the right moment. Let's move. Let's see. So these two, Amadioha and Ra, yes. Lequenseze, Ra. Amadioha and Ra. The two that jump out to me most. That's my method. I look around, see if I see the equal Neptune. Neptune's always the hardest one for me to get. But the easiest ones for me to get are Amadioha and Ra. Let's get specific, because so many people can be called Amadioha. Well, at least in my mind now, I know a lot of these big names are shared among big men. Let's say Amadio's Wanya Kalakana, huh? The big woman can stand with the big man, huh? She manifests as, well, let me see. Her main animal is called Aguala, the cat of this land, the matter cat. Its archetypal form appears as what we call a leopard. So just look up a leopard. Think of that animal. Spotted, relatively skinny cat, but still stocky enough that you know it's powerful. Yes, likes to climb trees. That is the woman of the greatest man alive. Wani Kalaka. Yes. And you can just call her Amadioha. Wani Kalakano. Amadioha. Same statement. Interesting. I'll leave it at that for now. Okay. I see many things swirling. That ook was gonna be big. Will I get Neptune first? See, Neptune's tricky. Let's see. Abu Mamadioha. 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 Boo 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 boo. Paw paw pet. Abu Mamadioha. Abu Mamadioha. Abu Mamadioha. Abu Mamadioha. Ha he ha he ha 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 ha. Abu Mamadioha. Abu Mamadioha. Abu Mamadioha. Ha he ha he ha he ha he. Abu Mamadioha. Ha. Abu Mamadioha. Ha. Monogamy is the ukwal, and I want to be very respectful here. So I'll just give a salvo. The victim of the crime is not being blamed here. This is a systemic issue. I'm just saying our relationships happen in context. And because of that, I just want to highlight two issues inherent to monogamy that were obviously prevalent in this crime. And then, you'll see them later. One is isolation of relationships. Again, Many people have come forward saying they were friends or they knew the family. I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying we needed more. We underestimate how many people we need to know in society today, and we also underestimate how many people are necessary to keep eyes on people. And I want to say this. Obviously, the subject here, as in the criminal, was an evil person. But he was also a big person. As in, this is a person who, when they are themselves, is one of the biggest people in society. And I'll leave it at that. I can say that because of the amount of ebube he had, his clout, his gravitational pull. And I'll just leave it at that. So what am I saying here? Someone like that should not tap out the way he did. But when someone like that chooses to tap out, ele, ele. So the fail-safe for that is to have many, many more eyes than usual on that. And that goes most especially in romantic contexts. And I'll leave it at that. So, monogamous relationships, just to go general again, are inherently isolating. And I'll leave it at that. And I'm just gonna go ahead and say monogamy slash I'll just say it in my language. Otumwe eso dinengunye. I'll leave it at that. And I'll just say isolation in marriage slash deep relationships. So, less eyes on any potential criminal. And then also just more opportunities for someone to tap out. Just less people getting on you to be well. And I'll leave it at that. So that's one aspect of it. And then second aspect of it is I have to walk actually. He hey ha ha. Abu Mamadi ni meya. Abu Mamadi bo 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 ben. Abu Mamadi po 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 pen. Abu Mamadi call call can. Abu Kala can naka. Abu Maka manju man. Abu Maka no kike. Thinking about to articulate it. Also, oh Lord. This one's not easy to say, but I'll just say it like this. Lack of baseline okay. And I'm gonna call the second one um, attempting to get all your emotional needs met by one person. Because the amount of stress that puts on people is not good, and then that can give bad people an excuse to lash out. See the number 22, that's a manifestation of 1111. Let's make a wish. May we overcome our queso, evil in relationships. Expand forever. Alright, so I have the Uko. I got Wanya Kalakan, Race to Become God. Let's wait till the end to fill in the 2 there. But I got the 2 for Uko and also Ra. Let's wait for Neptune. Neptune. I see many things swirling. Which one is Neptune? Is Neptune always naturally hard for me to get? I put a little bit. Neptune, god of the sea. Abu Neptune, 1, 2, 3. Neptune, 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 god of the sea. Abu Neptune, step 2, 1, 2, 3. Abu Neptune, Amadioha. Neptune, Abu Neptune, Hawking. Abu Neptune, god of the sea. Abu Neptune, 1, 2, 3. Neptune and Meshabu Amadio. Abu Neptune, hey ha. Agua. Yes. Here's Neptune. I will call this, and of course these systemic issues all have a link. I will call this one systemic discarding of the king. And let me explain that one. I was talking to my ancestors earlier and also my Ekeji. Shout out to them. And of course, I mean those in spirit, not the physical ones. The issue remains. But anyway, they told me that another term for Ezua is the king. And I want to go into this. The king is another one of the saints. What shall I say about the king? I've referred to it a bit before. Another way of saying the king is cha, shine. The king, it's like a sound. The king is a sound. The king, that is the king. It refers to his blade as he's in battle. The king. That's the leader of the world. And there's a duality of the king, because, you see, this is the thing with Onyeka, the saints. They mix and they mingle. Think of each person as a ball of string, and these balls of string mix and form other balls of string, you see. So the ball of string that he's most closely attached to is Ra, because you can also call Ra Ezua. Can you also call Ra the king? What am I hearing? No, but that's a duality. But anyway, the societal position of Ezua is the king. So everyone understands emotionally what the king is, except they've mixed in the idea of the king with God. The king is not a tyrant. And again, forget the exact manifestations of leadership you've seen by various regimes that have used that title. And I'll leave it at that. Again, no disrespect to anyone. There are many reasons things have come out a certain way, but I'm just talking about my understanding of leadership, and I'll leave it at that, okay? That's my way of being respectful. Of course, when I'm talking about metaphysics, I'm talking about things that are universal, but, I word it a certain way. And again, of course, I obey the law. Anyway, the king is not a tyrant, and the king does not stress himself. He's just powerful. Those are the two elements of that position that are missing. The implications of that are you're free to disagree with the king. You're free to even say, I hate the king. It's just, if the king is operating well, that's not a problem. And eventually everything will be good. And I'll leave it at that. Let me walk. Anyway, what am I getting at here? There are different people who are the king, and that is their innate personality. Okay? And I'll leave it at that. Now, I want to note the king is not the only leadership position. I want to note two other leadership positions, and again, these both exist within Amadioha, but again, okay, I'll note two other leadership positions within Amadioha, and then I'll talk about Izze. There are many different leadership positions. Okay. So first, let's go within Amadioha. We have Ugo, eagle, the overseer. I've explained that one before. The overseer is not the king, but he's big now. Then the second one is Neptune. That is the face of the king. I'm still learning more about that one, but it seems like he just comes and goes when he wants and just dominates everyone. Can I go into that one a bit more? let me not do it now, I'll do it later. But just note that the king is consistent. Neptune is not necessarily consistent, but you always have to deal with him. That's a different leader. I'll leave it at that. Then let's go outside of Amadioha and let's go at the base of leadership, which is the leader itself, what we might call in English leadership itself. Although my ancestors tell me that's not the best exact translation into Latin, but you know, Eze, the leader, the first mover. You see, our idea of peak leadership is a mix between various other leadership positions and half of what Eze is, the leader. You see, the first mover, the leader, is not always at the head of the movement, but he can be. But his defining characteristic is he did it first. The Ezua, the king, never does it first. If you see the king doing it first, he's actually downgraded it himself. Because again, if the leadership position exists outside of a Madioha, I'm hearing an exception. Anyway, let me say it like this. If the leadership position, should I use a different flow? Let me say it like this. Let me say it like this. The person who says something you've never heard before in a normal world is not the apex leader. Because in order to say something no one has heard before, he's had to stress himself so much that he cannot lead a calm movement. The first mover is not calm. And I'll leave it at that. Let me move. And I really want to emphasize that Neptune, for example, is usually more controversial than the leader. It's just you've heard what Neptune has said before. It's just he's more controversial. You will have literally never heard what Eze said before. Okay. Let me give a concrete example. And let me hope, because I'm still learning about the exact detailed differences between these archetypes, although I know the general overall. Let me give an example. Say that we emerge from the jungle. The person who told people that food is necessary is Eze. The king then says, that's an interesting idea. What do you all have to say about that? The overseer is just watching, and he's making sure that no one hurts themselves. And then Neptune is the one starting fights. Let's move. Abu Neptune, God of the sea. Abu Neptune, EK. But again, let me complete it. What does the king do? At the end of all that, the king comes and says, either what you all have put together in this discussion is good, or this is garbage. This is the truth. And then Hapwelele, as in the eagle does whatever is necessary. And again, that's just an example. Obviously, there are many more leadership positions. I hope you get what you're saying. So, what am I saying here? Our leadership archetypes are mixed, but we see the king a lot. I'll give two examples of the king. One, the lieutenant governor and or the vice president. Yes, this might be controversial, but it's known that the so-called governor and or the president, and again, I'm just saying that because metaphysically maybe we should call those positions something else, but those positions do not rule by themselves in systems that use them. Based upon what my ancestors have told me and also my observations, those positions, as in the so-called governor or the president, is really the Eze. And then the one who's said to be their second in command, and maybe we need to look at what that term really means metaphysically, is the king. Now, obviously, the president has been empowered over the vice president. And again, I'm not, arguing for an immediate change to, say, U.S. legal procedure. Obviously, we need due process. I'm just saying metaphysically, the vice president and or the lieutenant governor is an example of the king. Another example of the king. Think of any pastor in a Christian denomination. Again, obviously, I'm critical of them. The king is not necessarily good, but that is an example of the king. Let me move. Anyway, those are examples of the king. Let me sit for a second, although I think I'll be standing soon. But what am I saying? We have a problem of systemic discarding of the king. And this is what I mean. Either the king is a net positive, and I'll use that term. Either the king is a net positive and people decide that they don't want to grow. And in that case, the king is discarded. And this is at any level. It could even be as a child, because this is about the person's being. Or the king is a net negative and is not stopped sufficiently. And I'll say, again, I'll get into it in a second, but what happened with F is a case of the second. But both are unjust. You don't just discard the king. Either you stick with the king and you rehabilitate the king, or you actually have to stop the king. You don't just throw him away. because the king in the Badlands can become Ele. So part of the reason there's so much crime is because we've created Ele, because people are afraid of stopping the king, and that's because they believe he's God. You see, the secret is God is only a little bit better than Ele. So if you let him run amok, eventually God is gone and you have Ele. So yes, anyway. And let me write those down as the two things. So I'll put number 2 as failure to stop the king if he's bad. Just say failure to stop the king if they are bad. I'll say king slash Ezua. That's 2. And then I'll just say, I'll just say committing acts of evil against the king if they are good. All right, now let's fill in the race to become God. And again, these things are all linked. I'm just gonna go. I'll say 1 is I'll say lying about how much work everyone is doing. And this one is deep. I think I'll explain this more when I'm in motion about this crime specifically. Again, God does all of his own work. And again, I just want to say a reminder, I don't have firsthand knowledge of this case. I'm going off of media reports and my analysis of them. I just want to make that clear. And then I'm adding in my own metaphysical knowledge. Second thing about the race to become God, I will just say, tyranny. And that one, I hope it's clear. If you, I mean, in a way, it's the same thing. But God can also be called tyranny. But if you think you can do anything and everything, well, you just might do the worst thing. Anyway. All right. So those are the systemic issues. Let's get specific with them. Kabru Nam Nalgar. I think I'm going to stay seated. Yeah. So let's say, let's use the same coloration. I won't write everything, but I'll see the connections. I wish I could just write this stuff on the back of the paper, but then how would I remember everything? I need to look at it. Anyway, technological and energetic limitation here. We shall overcome. Let's just call it LTGF Aurala. Yes. All right. Kaburnum Nogoha. So I'm just gonna begin talking. Charmanyangu Kamjidanyangu. So, Wanya Kalakano, the overall one, systemic issue, race to become God. What's the main way that that manifests? And I'm gonna say it. The Ekwensu and the Amadioha for each leg are gonna be derived uniquely, although spiritually there will be a link. But the main meat topic is going to be linked. So, race to become God. What issue do I see at play here? Again, I'm looking at what's the goal here? To see how. Here we go. Actually, I need to take a second to walk. No, let's just take a second to think. How do I articulate this? What's the goal here? Because the goal of this is to cry out. What's the goal of the specific one? It's really just to say, Kalakana. I think it's just to see what specific factors I think what specific factors um what specific factors contributed to F having an excuse to tap out the way he did. And that's how I'm gonna word it. It's very delicate here. So the number one thing I want to look at here in the Wanyakala Kanu space, Amadioha, race to become God. How does that translate on individual level? I'm gonna look at his continued how do I articulate it? His continued I'm just gonna before I say this, I just want to make something clear. I'm not saying I think that our political culture in the world today say that necessarily how do I articulate this? I'm just gonna say as a disclaimer, obviously most politicians and leaders in the US today have not committed and will not commit the crime that F committed here. At the same time, you know, I think that our political culture is unhealthy, and one thing that's unhealthy about it is it's basically impossible for our elected leaders to have a healthy lifestyle. Okay, it's just known that they overwork themselves, and on top of that, there is unfortunately a lot of misconduct in political spaces. So when you put those two things together, it's quite frankly hard. It's not impossible, but it's hard for a healthy person to hold political office in the United States. I don't say that lightly, but it is what it is. Let me even walk. Amarama neighbor. Abu Mamadioha, ha 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 ha. Abu Mamadioha, ha 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 ha. Abu Mamadioha. Abu Mefefe, ha 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 ha. Abu Mefefe. Jido game, ha 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 ha. Abu Mamadioha. Abu Mefefe. Ane Mefefe. Abu Mefefe. Abu Mefefe, ha ha. Abu Mefefe. Abumefefe, haha, abumefefe, abumefefe, haha, abumefefe, abumefefe, haha, abumefefe, abumefefe, haha, nemefefe, abumefefe, haha, abumefefe, abumeferie, haha, abumeferie, abumeferie, haha, abumeferie, abumeferie, haha, abumefefe, abumefefe, haha, abumefefe, abumefefe, haha, anemebiozo. Efefe biara ọzọ, abụmọbi ọzọ, efefe biara ọzọ, ọkụkọ, efefe biara ọzọ, ọkụkọ na-ebi ọzọ, abụmọbi ọha, lefugo, efefe adoka, efefe, adoka efefe, adoka efefe, adoka efefe, udigwe, adoka efefe, udigwe, adoka efefe, udigwe. Adoka fefe ha na benua, adoka fefe ha na benua ha na benua, na benua ha na benua, na benua ha na benua, na benua ha na benebiozo, na benebiozo 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 ha na benebiozo. Nobelebiozo, 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 abumnobe monobiozo, nobe barakoko neba, nabe barakaka neba, nabe barakaso so neba, nabe barakaso so neba, abumokoko kaka. Let's put it up here. I'm just going to say the specific issue here, especially given how he chose to eventually commit such a horrible crime, is that the former lieutenant governor sought office in the first place. So what I'm going to say here is that the problem here, the Amadioha, is his seeking of political office. Because clearly, he was not fit for the position. Let me move. I feel moved to tell a story. Let me just begin. You see, there are many forms of flight. Our world is broken today. We cannot see every form of flight. And as a double, there are many forms of flight we can see we don't understand. We have a concept of swimming. Is swimming not a form of flight? Let us take ourselves as a category of life. At least right now, we cannot fly. It is impossible for me to stand on dry land and ascend to the heavens. At the same time, if I were to jump into a river and try and swim to the bottom, I would be in trouble. It would not happen very quickly. Many azu, backs, the things we now call fish, would go past me, and so would many of the things we call turtles. Nabe, the father of the piercing cry. Nabe is the father of Efefe. We have a concept of bird. The animal we call bird, that archetype, that is the base atumatu, the base idea of Efefe, fly. Side note, in my language today, I want to say it well, doggone. But from my reference point, we call it Igbo language. Che chiche biko, chebu ogologo, abruvuru ivu, abrubi ogologo. But I must say the truth when I tell the story. Anyway, many people call birds nuno. This is an insult. FFA, fe, fly, FFA, fly. Na FFA bunabe, the father of the fly is nabe. You see, this is a story I heard many times. I probably heard it too early, but nonetheless, I'll tell it in more fullness now. And what I'm going to add is stuff that I have gotten anew. Nabe. You see, Nabe was in the heavens talking to his Ogar, the birds. Ogar, Ifefe. You see, Nabe, of course, is one of the saints. He's one of the father of the saints. He's the father of the leader. Nabe Buamadioha. You can call this category of life a Madioha. And of course, there are many types of what we call turtle. Yes, but the base one, that is Nabe. And the final form of Nabe, Nabe Nua, Udigwe, Nabe Anyum Nurie. The father of the piercing cry of wife and the mixer, that thing we call the ocean, I am Norie, Nabe Neptune, Udigwe, peace. Think of a sea turtle, yes, especially the leatherback sea turtle. That is its base form, yes, that is peace. It's flying over you in the sea, everyone calms down, that is peace. Nabe Nebiozor. You see, the Onyeka, they can speak every language at once. He called these Efefe the birds. He was in the heavens. What does that mean? He was at the top of the stream. Ooh. What was going on here? Again, this story is so deep. If I told the full thing, I'd be part of the story. But let me just say this. He was talking to his archers because he had to go into battle. And they were at the top of the stream. They refused to dive down to the bottom. You see, there are many ways to refuse to dive down to the bottom. So they left Nabe to go down to the bottom. And all what does that mean? He exploded. His spirit divided in the worst way. But that doesn't mean, he didn't reach his goal. He just did it with just him and his wife. What does that mean? He went to the bottom of the stream. He was like, where's my water? And then Munya Nabe came, Mukwezi, the outside leg, the one who gives you standing. That's the wife of Nabe. She came and just said, please, Nabe, calm down. We can beat this enemy. And they beat the enemy. She put him back together. You see, that's the main point of the story. And I'll leave it at that. It gets told other ways. Let's not disrespect Nabe. Anyway, the father of the piercing cry. Anyway, what's my point here? There are many ways to abandon the king. You see, Nabe is also the king. Think about it. Think of a big turtle coming up the stream. Is that not the king? Wow. Some of the Azu misbehaving. Wow, that's the king. No, I don't like what you did. Wow, that is the king. You see, no king stands alone. There cannot just be one king. The king is not God. There are many ways to not support the king. You see, the king does not have to speak to the other king. Because Nabe is also Chuku, energy, spirituality. Why does the spirit have to speak to a spiritual person? The king is always a spiritual person. If the king even has to speak to the king in a time of trouble, that other king is not acting like the king. What am I saying? The king does not have to tell the other king not to go into the place where he's not fit. All the other king has to do is see the other king's position. What am I saying here? The criminal in this real world case I'm talking about, let's reframe. Lieutenant, ex-lieutenant governor. F. I think we can say years ago when he began his political career, he took the wrong trajectory. What am I saying? There's long been a conversation about the things I raise, these problems in American life. It's not a new observation. You see, it's not a new observation. You see, I think that, the Nabe of our world today was saying we need to open up new lanes of leadership. And let me say it in a way that's inclusive, you see, because I'm the king. The king is inclusive. You see, we have a habit in America today of always blaming Eze. Everyone is blaming the president. Okay, I criticize the president, but I'm not always blaming him. Why do you think I usually don't mention him? Igwe kaka kaka abumi igwe kare kana uwa igwe kaka kaka abumi igwe igwe anuwa igwe kaka kaka abumi igwe nuwa ngeza igwe kaka kaka abumi igwe kono. You see, Ezra is not relevant without Uzuku Matze, without his group, without his self, without his Oka Oheze. If you want to influence Oheze, you cannot always be talking to Eze, because Eze rolls deep. What am I saying? Nabe wanted to fall back. And again, I'm speaking metaphorically, I'm speaking spiritually, but I'm also speaking very worldly and practical. I hope you get me. Eze was saying, or Nabe was saying, we just need to really have people respect the king again. We don't need more tyranny. And there's nothing more tyrannical than if you have someone who's naturally the king running to go and be Eze in a time of crisis. Let me move. Alright, let me get more words. What am I saying here? On a practical level, what am I saying? That lane of activity that the unfortunately now criminal chose is very stressful. And there's also a high potential, if you're wrong, to hurt people. And I'm just going to say this. I think part of the reason we pay so much attention to that lane, again, not that you shouldn't pay attention to that lane, but we overdo it relative to other things. Part of the reason we're doing it is because we have so many people whose gravitational pull and natural clout is more suited to the more withdrawn position, the king, running to be there. And that has to do with the systemic issue of the discarding of the king, okay? A lot of people say, okay, they don't like the king. Let me, yes, I'll say it, lower myself. And I say this with respect, okay? Again, I never said that in theory, the king can never do what Eze does, but that's a flex. We don't need the king to flex right now. The king just needs to stand, okay? What am I saying? That's a very stressful area. That's an area where you need to be very exact, else you'll hurt a lot of people. Let me let you in on a secret. The king is not very exact. He's talking general. The king can easily step on your toes and he's supposed to. But the king is not supposed to be evil. Okay, the king can be evil. That's just because the king is a person, but he's not supposed to be. Let me move. So what am I saying here? You see, F should have just done something else with his life. Because I think it's clear, and I want to make this very clear. We have a habit in the world today of thinking that when people are speaking of things on a spiritual level, they're not taking themselves seriously, or what they're saying isn't important, at least in many circles. Not everyone, many circles. That's not what I'm doing here. Everything I'm saying has immediate worldly importance, okay? I don't say this lightly, but once again, given how he ultimately chose to commit the worst possible crime, it's clear that this individual, this former lieutenant governor's decision to be involved in politics in that way was not good for his well-being, and it therefore left him in a state where he had an excuse to lash out. Let me paint a picture for you. He was 47 years old when he passed, unfortunately by his own action a couple days ago. That's not a literal new person, but that's a person who, even by modern standards, is not necessarily even halfway through his lifespan. When he became lieutenant governor, he was either 40 or maybe he was before 40. When he first got involved in politics, he was at least, at most in his 30s. He might have even been in his 20s. Keep in mind, this is an individual who had attained high academic honors, okay? Graduated from a private school for high school. And I want to note, it seems like he might have even skipped a grade because according to his records, again, he was born in 1979. He graduated from high school in 1996. He was 17 when he graduated. Okay. So since that's a private school, and I want to say I know of the school, okay, you know, again, I don't, well, I'll just say it like this. I went to a different school. I've been to the school that many times, but my parents did consider sending me to the school when I was in middle school. Okay, it's a high school. Okay, again, I don't want to, you know, uh, you know, make the focus go too many places. But I'm just saying that from what I know of the school, it's more competitive than average, and it's a private school. Okay. I do also want to note, just because there's nothing else, the school did release a statement upon his passing that many thought was callous because it didn't really address what he'd done and glorified him. Based upon reading the statement, which was published, again, you can find it online, at least copies of it. I would agree. Let me walk. But anyway, that school, more competitive than average. Again, he graduated before I was born, so I'm not going to pretend I know every detail of what it was like to go there when he was there. But again, I know that much for context. What am I saying? That's an above average student. He went to Duke University. That's an above average school. Graduated, then went to Columbia Law School. This is a very above average student. And from what I read of his life, I believe, really, I would say once you're in law, I mean, I've never been to law school, but I would say once you're in law school, you're politically active by default. So we can just leave it at that. This is a guy who was already very politically active. There are many avenues he could have taken. And then after he graduated, he was a practicing lawyer. I'm not going to even suggest one thing he could have done. There's a lot of other things he could have done. And I also want to say this. I don't like us limiting our idea of what our lifespan is like. Okay, I've been a big proponent of us, putting our eyes on the fact that we can live longer. Okay, I've said that many different ways. But at the same time, even if you're looking at, modern perceptions of lifespan, there's no reason for someone of that age to be seeking the absolute highest level position. Because let me break it down like this. Again, these are the practices I've observed in those high level political spaces. Okay, I've never run for office, but I've observed it. Well, like not, well, I mean, I've seen political candidates speak. Here we go. Um, Let me walk for a second. Okay, again, I'm not saying what I say lightly. I'm just saying. Um, Forgive me. I'm just thinking for a second there. Let me take a pause. So what am I saying here? You see, basically, he first ran for Attorney General of Virginia in 2013. He didn't win, but at that time, how old would he have been? Born 1979. If you go to 2000, that's 21. Add 13 years, that's 34. That's very early in his political career. Apparently, he took that loss very badly. Okay, that was noted in court documents related to his divorce. Okay, apparently, he started drinking heavily and things of that nature. Obviously, that already shows he didn't have good perspective, and that also the experience affected him a lot. But it looks like he kept going. I won't say he got himself back together because something like what he did, that doesn't just erupt. Well, you see, I'm not a proponent of once a criminal, always a criminal. I'm not going to say anything of that nature. I'm just going to say, if within a 20, 15, 20 year span, you start engaging in certain behaviors again, and then you end the worst possible crime. I'll just say you probably just hid signs of being a criminal. But anyway, after that he continued with the political career, but already that's very early. Let me plug in my phone, right? Then by the time he's about 40, he runs for office again. He wins the position of lieutenant governor. And I don't remember in Virginia whether or not the lieutenant governor runs on a ticket with the governor or if it's the runner up. I have to look that up. But nonetheless, he wins office. That's a very high level office. Then, because of a scandal with the governor, when he's in his early 40s, he's in line to become the governor. And I'll get into the scandal that people say derailed him later. But what I'm saying is this. He's basically 2 degrees of separation away, or maybe even one, depending on how you want to say it, from being president of the United States. And this is why. Basically, once someone is in a position where they have national attention and, how do I want to say it? Let's say they have no more than one other position they can run for in their direct lane in their branch of government. That person can be president, at least in theory. You see. So, for example, if you're going up through a state government, the highest position is governor. If the only other place you can go is governor, you can run for president, at least in theory. If you're, in Congress, say the only higher position you could get is like Speaker of the House or, what is it? What they call the head of the Senate again? Forgive me, I'm well studied in this, just English. But that position. You can run for president. It's been done before. And then, of course, if you're mayor of a major city, you can run for president. And then it has to be acknowledged. I mean, the current president, before he was president, he didn't even hold office. He was just a prominent individual. Okay. Let me walk. Forgive me, I'm just having a thought. Anyway, Kabrinam Nongo. I know I've been here a while, but I'm really trying to figure something out. So, no promises of a short live stream. But anyway, go in and out as you please. Go in and out as you please. But if you want to join me the whole time as well, that's welcome. Anyway, what am I saying here? Basically, once he's lieutenant governor, in theory, he can run for president. And now there's nothing. I have to address it. This individual is a black man, as in he's a member of the black category of existence. And why have I just been slow to bring this up? Just because let me move. Let me stay on screen, but let me move. You see, I'm just gonna say it like this. I'm gonna be raw. I think you see there's been a large minority of other I'll just say black men, but I'll say that, I'm not sure they're the only individuals who've done this, but there's a large minority of them who've made the climate bad by trying to excuse the behavior of individual criminals who happen to be black men because they're black and they're men. And that's relevant in this case because I'll say he did this himself when he was alive. What am I saying? He got accused of SA by two women while he was lieutenant governor. Again, I'll go more into that in a bit. I'll do that when I'm doing the point that correlates with systemic discarding of the king. But what am I saying here? Long story short, he used him being black as an excuse. Again, obviously, given what he's done, it's not hard to see him doing what he was accused of. At the same time, I don't want to pretend I have firsthand knowledge of those cases, and I'll leave it at that. It's just, no matter what happened, that's not a defense. You cannot get off from a crime by saying I'm black. Let me move. And I just want to make this clear. This individual is not representative of black men in general. He's not representative of black people in general. He's not representative of the black race in general. And he's not representative of black kings. Let me say that. He's not representative of black kings. You can also call the king kings. Is a king. Leader king, the king, kings. A black version of that, black kings. He's not representative of black kings. And because of that, no one in a desperate attempt to defend any of those groups I've mentioned should defend what he's done. Let me move. So again, I'm going to leave that there for now. But why am I bringing up the fact that he's black? I'm bringing that up just because when talking about someone becoming president, obviously, given just given obviously we've had a black president. We've had one clearly black president. Obviously, that would be President Obama. But there's been speculation that other presidents were black. Again, it's very possible. Again, like there are a lot of people who might be of mixed race that either don't say it or aren't identified. But regardless of that, it's still obviously difficult for any black person to become president. There's an additional tax there, and I'll leave it at that. But at the same time, you can't say it's impossible from the vantage point where he was at as lieutenant governor. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time talking about, how that would have factored in, just because that's complicated. Just know that obviously, given the state of politics today, that would have played against him. At the same time, it could have been overcome. Why am I saying that? Oops. Why am I saying that? The whole point I'm making here is that if he's able to be, if he was able to attain, let me take off this charger. Let's see. If he was able to attain a position of that stature while being black, he's very politically powerful. Because I want to bring in something else here. Black people are not just the anti-blackness that we face. Let me move. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because I want to make the point that anti-blackness is unnatural. Given that it's unnatural, it is never the only factor in play. Because of that, there are other factors that one must look at when looking at someone's overall position always. Now, if you look at the position he was able to attain, being a black person, while anti-blackness was present, this is a man who was naturally very powerful, and on top of that had a lot of momentum. He could have done a lot of things with that momentum. He could have gone forward, and I want to say this, he later ran for governor. Let's be real. A man in his 40s running for governor wants to be president of the United States. Let's move. What do you heard? So, let's move. He has enough ike, strength, momentum, same thing, to become, or at least reach out and attempt to become, and really at some point we have to acknowledge, especially in the post-Trump era, because I'll just say it, Trump's first term was very unlikely to happen. Because even though America is based on a foundation of racism, there are limits. So when he broke that limit, he really broke the door open for everyone. Let me not curse myself, because I'm just going to say this. I don't have any ambition to become president. And yeah, it's weird I'm saying this, but it is what it is. Let me not curse myself, but in theory, when I turn 35, even after everything I've been through, I could become president now, more so than before. Because really, that is crazy, and he's won a second term. What am I saying here? We have to acknowledge that was on the cards. But let's look at what it takes to build up that momentum. Again, you have to be the king, and you have to be the king with a lot of power. What does that mean? He could have used it to do other things, and crucially, he could have used it to do other things in a lane that would not have destroyed his well-being. No matter what, any criminal who commits the worst crime has a terrible state of well-being. Otherwise, they would not be doing it. That doesn't mean they're not responsible for their actions. All that means is that if you have a good state of well-being, you will not have an excuse to commit such a crime. And on top of that, you will likely reform yourself if you were even that criminal to begin with. Let me move. So, let's bring the paper back. It was behind the phone. It's in front of the phone now. Former Lieutenant Governor F, seeking political office, put him under strain. It put him in a position where his well-being was destroyed and he was concerned with many things outside of himself, as you have to be when you're a leader in those positions. And it put him on a trajectory to continue doing so. Because I want to say this. After he left political office, it said he was, at least it said that he had challenges. I'll put it like that, because many people have still even come forward now saying they were connected to him. So that doesn't seem like a pariah to me exactly. That's something to look into. But he had challenges. He couldn't get back into the political game, at least not in that moment. And then he had trouble getting employed at a law office. Okay, I'll get into that when I talk about systemic discarding of the king and systemic financial nonsense as it relates specifically to this case. But what am I saying? He was also involved in some legal cases. There was one I read about, I'll find it exactly again, that was high profile. Again, that's very straining. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I think there are different things you could do with a law degree and legal experience that could allow you to take care of yourself. I think he just had a mode of operation that says go, go, go. So he's not even looking at what's going on in here. And again, that is his fault. But if he had at least not been in that lane, he could have shaped up. He wouldn't have had the excuse of all these outer crises. So, the race to become God is a systemic issue. How did it manifest here? His seeking of political office. What are the two things I'm looking at here that specifically show this? And that's how I'll phrase it. One, I will say his continued jockeying for political office even after being accused of vile crimes. And I'll leave it at that, but I'll just say this. People in this society today are very quick to defend others, especially famous people who've been accused of vile crimes, but do not ask themselves why those people are not doing more to get to the bottom of what happened. Because let me say it like this. No matter what, if someone has been accused of, and I want to pick my words carefully here, if someone has been accused of a vile crime, and in this case we're talking about the nexus of crime, if someone has been accused of that, something terrible has happened. I'm not going to say everyone who's accused is guilty, but many are guilty. And let me just say it like this. If for some reason the person who was named is not guilty, something has happened. And I'm going to leave it at that. Something has happened. Someone came out and said, this horrible thing occurred. Something has happened. And I'm going to leave it at that. The entire situation must be investigated. That is not normal. And if someone was named wrongly, they should say, okay, to the best of my ability, I am one of the top detectives. How has something happened where my name has come up? And I'll leave it at that. And again, if you have the resources to run for political office, you have the resources to investigate what has happened. He didn't do that. Going to the media and saying I'm innocent is not enough. Just pause your operations. Do you have, and let me be careful here. Do you know how serious that is? So if you're just gonna go on and jockey for office after something like that has happened, and again, two people have said it, you think you're God. That's not good. And again, I want to acknowledge there are people who are less prominent who might not have the resources to pause and do what I'm saying. Again, this man launched another campaign for office and was continuing to serve in office. So, yeah. So, that's one. Because again, the whole point I'm making is that shows that his seeking for political office caused unnegative healthy effects in his mindset and behavior. Okay, he just kept going, going, going. What else? This one, I think how to articulate it. I think I'll say it like this. Um, I'll say it made him. I, I, I'll say it like this. He ended up feeling trapped because at some point it looks like after he lost the race for governor and left the office of lieutenant governor, he just said, well, my political career is over because he was obsessed with that one lane. That's like God. Because God thinks he can do anything, he thinks success is guaranteed in everything. That's the mentality you see here. So he ended up feeling trapped. He felt trapped by his own unreasonable goals and expectations. And what does this all mean? He had an excuse to tap out. All right, next. I'm going to be quick with this one. The general issue is monogamy. Obviously, this was a relationship issue. And again, I want to emphasize I'm not blaming the victim, okay? His wife, who, really ex wife, who he, committed the worst possible crime against before, his own unfortunate passing. Um, I'm just saying it's an unhealthy societal practice that's systemic, and I see it at play here. How do I see it at play here? I'm just going to call it the living situation. And I want to be quick here. Living under the same roof with someone that you have such a great dispute with that, um, your criminal mind is making up plans to actualize an excuse. That's terrible. Now, obviously, the vast majority of people, um, um, you know, who engage in monogamy do not do what he did. But there are a lot of couples disagreements, and that's because the idea that one person is your everything and one person will never, disturb you, basically, because that's really the implications of that. That one person you're in a relationship with is your God. Again, these things are all linked. That idea leads people to live on top of each other, and that's not healthy. And then he just used that general societal systemic expectation as an excuse to do what he decided to do. Okay. So I'm just going to say two things. One, him not moving out immediately. I'm just going to say that. I'm just going to say this. Without monogamy, I think the vast majority of people, one, have multiple places they live, and two, do not default to living with another person. This doesn't mean, and this is what I mean by that. I'm not saying you don't live close to other people. Of course, you live close to other people. You live close to your loved ones. But everyone should have their own unit. And I'm not saying people can't choose to have a joint unit. Of course, you can. But that should not be everyone's default. And that is not instead of the single unit. If there's a singular unit there, I really don't think, you know, again, I don't know everything, but I really don't think he's in that kind of intimate contact with his ex-wife, at least based upon what's been made publicly available. And definitely, if for some reason they were in a joint living situation, I think he would have found less of an excuse to not move out immediately, because it just wouldn't be as socially expected that you're under the same roof as your wife. Because let's be real, Inherently, and this is not really about monogamy, but inherently, relationships have an aspect of appearance about them, and that's not necessarily bad. And I'll leave it at that because you want to look good. In other words, good life looks a certain way, and I'll leave it at that. But if you only have one relationship, it has to look good. There's no room for messiness. And I'll say this from talking to my ancestors and thinking, before the decline of mankind, and that's what I'm calling it because that's what it is. Mankind is decline. Before the decline of mankind, it was understood that people's relationships would not live up to the idea. That does not mean that people would constantly be quote unquote breaking up and that there would be crime in relationships. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the idea of romantic relationships is sacred. And that standard is very high. At the same time, because of the nature of human desire, it'll frequently not be met. Let me paint a picture for you. And this is crude, but I'm just going to say it like this. The idea of a romantic relationship will involve let's say two people, because again, monogamy is bad, but the individual connection is important. You see what I mean? So, two individual people in their ideal relationship, if you see the picture, they're standing up straight and they're smiling. Okay, I'm just being crude. In real life, they're frequently running all over the room while the camera is trying to take a picture of them. Okay, I hope you get what I mean. So there'll be messiness there. Maybe when the camera takes the picture, someone sneezes. You get what I'm saying? There'll be some messiness there, but it's not evil. It's just kind of all over the place. So before the fall of man, it was understood that your relationships would be kind of messy. Okay, up to a point, up to a point. A lot of what we call relationship messiness now is just a manifestation of the devil, and I'll leave it at that. You know, the standard is in the floor, but the flip side of that is people want people think that if their one relationship doesn't look like the picture, it's over. So then, if you have a deranged individual, they can take drastic measures. Let's see, him not moving out immediately. So him not moving out immediately, and I will say, and this one I want to say very carefully. I will say, um, I will just say, and again, this is not the fault of his neighbors, but I will say insufficient contact with his neighbors. This is what I mean. If we have a different societal standard for relationships, people live in a different way. I think people live near more people, and people live in such a way that they naturally run into more people. It doesn't seem like he and his wife were unknown to their neighbors, but I'm just saying, especially for such a famous person, he should have had like 1,000 neighbors. I'll put it like that. And that's a societal problem. In this individual case, I think especially if someone doesn't have 1,000 neighbors, to be somewhat metaphorical, that just leaves too much to be desired. So I'll just say insufficient neighbor contact, because I think that's part of the living situation. Because again, another thing to note is that reports had said he'd become withdrawn from family life and social life. So I'm assuming, even if he wasn't unknown to his neighbors, he wasn't interacting with them maybe as much as he had previously, or even as much as maybe some of his other relatives are. And if that happens, it can be hard, to keep an eye on someone. So I'll just put insufficient neighbor contact. Again, this is not to blame um, his family or his neighbors. I'm just saying um, that's a specific manifestation of a systemic issue that I think um, gave him an excuse to do what he did. All right, so you have systemic discarding with the king as the Neptune, the Kenga. That's the third area I'm looking at generally. How did it manifest specifically? And I hope this is making sense to everyone. How do I want to articulate this? Because I divide it into two categories: failure to stop the king if they're bad, and committing acts of evil against the king if they're good. And obviously, you can commit acts of evil against the king if he's bad as well. As long as the person's around, they can be wronged. Um, so, this is really the first articulation of that. Um, I think it would be better for me to look at actions here. So I've already written it. I think the best way to articulate this is really people commit acts of evil against the king, and then they also. How do I articulate that? You know what? Wow. No, people commit acts of evil against the king, one, and two, they do not stop the king's bad actions. What does that mean? They're just trying to turn the king into Ezarala, the leader of evil. Wow. That's deep. Let me walk. Anyway, so that's a better articulation of that. How is that manifesting here? Because in my mind, it's hard when I'm looking specifically. Kalakana. How do I articulate this? Let's see. Let's focus on the goal again. What's the goal? The goal is to see what factors gave, and I'll just call it the individual, an excuse to commit crime. Ugh. Neptune's deeply linked to Wainukalakanu here. Systemic discarding of the king. This one, you see, this is very specific, but I just find it hard to disconnect it, or I'll say it like this. This thing I'm going to identify, I think it might in a way shock people because what I'm implicitly advocating for is very far from what people do now. Okay. But what I'll say is just what I see here is, and again, this is not to blame any authority here, because again, ultimately, this is an individual who clearly hid, and what he did is his own fault. But I will just say a lack of 24/7 monitoring by authorities. And I don't say that one lightly. Why am I saying this? Kaburnam Nogoha. I'm just saying I think we need to raise our standards. Because there are two factors at play here. One, this is not a small time individual. This guy was the lieutenant governor of Virginia, and he ran for governor. And he's also connected to many other large organizations and has attained much otherworldly prestige. So that is an asset to society. Again, I'm using the term asset very ruthlessly here, and this is what I mean. If you buy a car, and again, obviously, I'm talking about a human being here literally, but I just have to use a crude, quick analogy. Kabunam Nongoha, Sansoneba. Again, this is crude, but I'm working quickly here. If you buy a car, that car is an asset. Even if that car is disadvantageous to you. This is what I mean. That thing is there, it's expensive, and it's to be used. It might not have made sense for you to buy the car, and maybe the car is poorly constructed. Nonetheless, that's an asset. You don't just leave it. If you find that the car is not advantageous to you, you don't just leave it in the ditch. You have to undergo a process to sell the car. And worse to worse, you have to undergo some sort of process to formally break down the car into its components just to free up space. You see what I'm saying? And again, that's kind of where the analogy gets loose. Obviously, with a person, the speech is different. But you have to get what I'm saying here. Given all that society had invested into former Lieutenant Governor F's development and the position he's occupied, he's not someone who could just be left alone, even after scandal. Either he had to be rehabilitated or he had to just be put under house arrest. Because if he's in a position where he's not just sick and has to be rehabilitated, and I mean like sick on a basic level, not sick as in like a sick person. You see what I'm saying? If he's not in a position where that's it and you just have to give him medicine or whatever, that's someone making a choice to do bad. And given his power and position, that's someone who has to just be put under house arrest. We need to raise our standard. I also want us to once again take a look at the two accusations of SA he had. That's very serious. Okay, I think we've become jaded as a people. If someone gets accused of that, one, they should devote all their resources to finding out what happened. Obviously, if they're guilty, they confess, and well, then we move into house arrest. Okay, let's just pray that let's pray the crimes don't happen anymore. But a lot goes on with that. But then, if for some reason the accusation is not fair, they should be devoted to figuring out what happened. All resources, but it shouldn't just be them. All hands on deck. What happened? And I'll leave it at that. And then, part of looking into crime is seeing about the character of the accused. You should do a full sweep of the accused character. If you find something untoward, well, you found another crime, haven't you? So, and again, obviously, there's scale of transgressions. If it's a small crime now. I have to walk. I'll just give this as an example. Say you found out that someone got sick once and accidentally sneezed on someone else, and they didn't have a napkin on hand to hand the other person. Let me just use that example. Obviously, that's not something you just remove the other person for. but you still have to just be like, okay, could you maybe send them like $20 to buy some napkins and like maybe an extra 20 to buy a new shirt? Oh yeah, okay, they should just fix that. Then that's the end of that. But if you find that, say, maybe someone gets accused of, say, what he was accused of, and you're still investigating that issue, but you find conclusive evidence that maybe they stole a car, for example, just put them under house arrest and keep searching. You understand what I'm saying? I hope you get what I mean. So what am I saying here? Given his station, when he's in trouble, people should look into that. Hey, why is he in trouble? Why are all these problems manifesting in his life? The problems that are due to factors that are not his fault and or stuff that is reformable, as in stuff that other people can do, say you just give him medicine, just fix those. That's an institution. A person can be an institution. The king as a person is an institution. Institution can be bad. If the institution's gone bad, fix it or just keep it on ice. Then there's other things, and clearly we can say it now given what he did. There's other things that are clearly just his thing. When you find those are in play, just house arrest. That's putting someone on ice. Okay. But he was just able to go through problems without much oversight. Again, what I'm saying is there should have been like a million public statements and articles and things about what he was going through so everyone knows. And then, certain things, house arrest. I'll leave it at that. Even in reports I read, the device he used to commit his crimes, he at least had bought a version of that in 2022. And this is when people around him were concerned about his mental state. That should not have been able to happen. Let me move. So, two things. Lack of 24/7 monitoring by authorities. I think that should have been happening. So, two things. One, I would say he was able to, and again, I'll just say this. The Second Amendment of the United States of America must be reformed. And I'll just say it like that. The type of technology that people are able to get, the type of technology that people are able to get, um, you know, with under that law is just not appropriate. Really, those things shouldn't exist. And I really mean every version of it. I'm going to be very radical here. Even the most basic versions of that type of technology, I hope you know what I'm talking about, are very unnecessary for life. It's just not necessary. If you're trying to get an animal to eat, we have rope. I'll leave it at that. We don't even need the other things. And then I don't want to talk about the other things. You don't need that. You don't need that. Let me move. So one, I know it might be. I don't know the exact law in Virginia. I don't know exactly the conditions under which he obtained that device, but overall, I think at the very least, if that device was obtained, the world should have known. It just should have been known. That should have been factored into a monitoring situation, and then probably the device just should not have been there. So I'll just say one. Uh, he was able to obtain. He was able. He was able to obtain a. I want to be careful here. I'll just say a handheld, and I'll put it in quotes, combat device in 2022 and beyond. Because I don't know if he was using the same one or if it's a different one. And I'll put at least, just put a lot of dots here. I hope you know what I'm saying. Okay. The ARM device he obtained, he shouldn't have had. Just shouldn't have had it, obviously. Shouldn't have had it. So there's that again. Lack of monitoring. And I'm just being very specific. Someone like that, 24/7 monitoring. Standard must be upped. That is a collective thing. Yes. Thinking how to articulate the next one. Oh, 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 I want you, and then I'll just say again, um, this is something that I guess people don't think of as standard. It's called my ancestors, but I'll just say it. I'll just say he was able to go about his life without having the public receive daily updates about him. You know. I'll leave it at that. Obviously, if more of a light was shown on him, he has less of an excuse. Abu Neptune gotta see. Abu Neptune gotta see. Abu Neptune 1, 2, 3. Abu Neptune Kika. Neptune a nation who am Adiura. Neptune a nation who am Nishia Ka. Nishia Ka. Madiura. Niwe Abu Madiura. Niwe Abu Madiura. Hey, Abu Madiura. 1, 2, 3. Abu Neptune gotta see. Abu Neptune Kika. Neptune a nation who am Adiura. Madiura. Niwe Madiura. Honey Brother King. Honey Brother King. Alright. Fourth and final category, then I'll get out of here. Systemic financial nonsense. How did that manifest here? I know what it is. I'm just thinking how to articulate it. Let me move again. Kabunam nogoha. Abum oga oha. Abum oga oha. Abum ogoha. Abum ogoha. Abum ogoha. Abum ogoha. Abum ogoha. Abum Neptune gotta the sea. Abum Neptune gotta the key. Abum Neptune 1, 2, 3. Neptune a magic woman to you. Abu Neptune gotta the sea. Abu Neptune gotta the key. Abu Neptune Kika. Neptune a magic woman to you. Abu Mama to you. Abu Mama to you. Abu Neptune gotta the sea. Abu Neptune gotta the key. Neptune woman to you. Neptune Kika. Neptune Goosey say Neptune Goo Abu Neptune 1, 2, 2. Neptune 1, 2, 2. Abu Neptune 1, 2, 2. Abu Neptune 1, 2, 3. Abu Neptune what say ye? Abu Neptune ha hey. Abu Neptune ha hey. Abu Neptune ha hey. Abu Neptune ha hey. Abu Neptune he hey ha. Abu Neptune see say ha. Abu Neptune ha. Abu Neptune ha. Abu Neptune ha. And I'm in kaka. And I'm in and I'm in Abu Neptune, the key and the king that's a muddy, the key and the king that's a muddy, the key and the king, Abu Ra, Abu Ra, Abu Ra, Abu Ra, Abu Meze, I am amazing, I am amazing, I am the king, I am the king, I am the king, I am the king. I am the king, I am the king, I am the king, I am the king. Ha 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 ha. Abu Neptune, 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 Neptune got on the sea. Abu Neptune got on the key. Abu Neptune 1, 2, 3. Sons of their power, weapon shot. Abu the king, Abu the king, Abu the king, Abu the king. Abu Neptune got on the sea. Anyangu kiki abu hayana Neptune hayana Anyangwa ha. Yes. nonsense. I'm gonna say the manifestation here. Let's walk again. Up Neptune out of the sea high. Up Neptune into the high. Up Neptune Neptune out of the sea high. Neptune hey high. Neptune out of the sea high. Neptune 1, 2, 3 high. Neptune Kike high. Up Neptune out of the sea. Oh, Neptune, oh, Neptune, oh, Neptune, oh, Neptune, meya, Neptune, measure, Amadua, Neptune, Bidabuya, Konya, you can get Neptune, Kala, Kakala, Kakalua, Kala, Kanu, Nejunua. Kala kanu no kikeya, kala kanu kikeya, kala kanu kikeya. Neptune, god of the sea. Neptune 1, 2, 3. Abu Neptune Kikeika. Neptune measure Bumonishiaka, Bumonishiaka, Bumonishiaka. Kala Kanu Nejunua. Kala Kanu no Kikeya. Kala Kanu Hihehua. Kala Kanu Nuaya. Kala Kanu Koke. Kala Kanu Komoze. Kala Kanu Nuaya Bunkala Kanu no Kikeya Kala Kanu Hiheya Bunkala Kanu Niveya Abu Neptune 1 of the 3 Abu Neptune 1 of the 3 Abu Neptune 1 of the 3 Neptune 1 of the 3 Abu Monishi Ezeka Abu Neptune 1 of the 3 Abu Neptune Kikeika Neptune Meshabu Amadioka Amadioha Niveya Mamadioha Sise Sa Mamadioha Hiya Mamadioha Bobe Mamadioha Madioha Man Mamadioha Madioha Be Mamadioha Madioha Be Mamadioha Nepeya Abumamadiyo anepera, abumamadiyo anuzoya, abumamadiyo anisiaka, onisiaka bumamadiyo, onisiaka andubisiaka, abumamadiyo aniveya, abumamadiyo 1, 2, abumamadiyo 1, 2, 3, abumamadiyo abumamadiyo bobobe, abumamadiyo aniveya. Systemic financial nonsense. I think this systemic issue manifested in this way, in this case, in a very carbon copy way, as in a very copy paste way. To be blunt, I think that the individual at the center of this case here, the criminal, the one who committed the worst possible crime before his untimely passing, was himself engaging in financial nonsense, and that's what I'll call it. I'll just say he was engaging in financial nonsense. Abu Neptune, god of the sea. Abu Neptune 1, 2, 3. Neptune, he, hey, ho. Neptune, haw, haw, hey. I'm Neptune, ball, ball, bear. Neptune, haw, haw, ha. I'm Neptune, kind of, ha. I'm Neptune, TK, I'm Neptune, one of the three. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, up, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, up, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, up, 1, 2, 3. Now you see me up, 1, 2, 3. You see me up, 1, 2, 3. Then you see me up, 1, 2, 3. You see we up, 1, 2, 3. Haw, haw, head up, 1, 2, 3. Ball, ball, play up, 1, 2, 3. Paw, paw, play up, 1, 2, 3. Haw, haw, head up, 1, 2, 3. And again, I'm going to say this. Some of the things I'm saying here, in a way, might seem harsh, but I'm just going to say this. Just because something is being abandoned systemically doesn't mean it's not basic. I'll note two basic things he was doing and or not doing that are financial nonsense. One, and I'll just say this, I'll just say not having his own business. And I want to let you guys in on a little secret here. Whenever I talk about business, I'm really dumbing it down for the public. What am I saying? The way we work now is unnatural. 99% of people get into a scenario where someone else controls 100% of what they do work-wise. That shouldn't exist. Let me move. Neptune got us a Z. Neptune 1, 2, 3. Neptune haw haw head. Abu Neptune Kalmaze, Abu Kalmaze. Aburunam biko biaoze, biko biaoze, biko biaoze, biko biaoze, biko biaoze. Aburunam biko biaoza, biaoza, bumamadioha. Kalmaza, bumamadioha. He, hey, ha, bumamadioha. Amadioha, bumamadioha. Yeah. I'm not going to specify exactly what business he should have had, but a man of his fame and stature should have been able to set up something. And why am I saying this? It's easy for him to get media attention, and I'll leave it at that. It's easy for him to get public attention outside of the so-called media. With that, if you have your own business, unless something crazy is going on. And I want to be clear, I'm not preaching a message of guaranteed financial invincibility. That's not true. I'm just saying there's no evidence that he was at the point where you have to start looking at, if you're expecting that of someone. If he at least has his own business, whatever it may be, people can pour into it, whether or not other people are feeling him. You understand what I'm saying? Let me move. Abumamadi yuhani weya, abumamadi yuhani pera, abumamadi yuhapopope, abumamadi yuhapopope. Because at some point you just have to say it's kind of financial nonsense to have had his trajectory, been in the positions he's been in, and not even had some sort of business of his own. And I'll leave it at that. So because of that, he ends up under financial pressure, and then he makes his choice. Again, he gives himself an excuse. Let me move. And then two, move. I'll say in a way these are kind of related. I'm just gonna say this one. There are caveats to this, but I'll say this one. I'll say the second form of financial nonsense is, I'll just say, misusing his funds. And this one, I'll put a mental star next to because I'm always careful when talking about this. Because I think people don't understand money in the world today. But it seems to me like he didn't use his funds properly based upon the amount of stress he let himself be under. And I'll leave it at that. There's no such thing as financial invincibility, but one, obviously, he'd obtained a lot of stature throughout his life, and it seems like he made a higher than average amount of money. I mean, even the salary to be lieutenant governor is higher than average, I'm sure. And then from one report I read, he got about $300,000 in, I guess, attorney's fees from working on a relatively high profile legal case after he left office. So, again, not behind the scenes with him, obviously. I don't know. Perhaps, other things were going on, but I'll just say two things. One, if you have the ability to obtain those kind of funds, 3 years previously, you shouldn't be down on your own ability to make money when you are not being inhibited. Let me say it like that. Because if, say, he had an illness or something like that that was prohibiting him from working, that's just a question of, let me, talk to my network, talk to my family, whatever, and have them put me in a position to heal. So I'm saying that because, that should have, if that was the issue, that shouldn't have led to the amount of despondency I see there. Again, I see a lot of despondency there based upon the reports I've read that, again, he uses an excuse to go further and commit a horrible crime. I'll leave it at that. Two, if, how do I want to say this? If you have that much experience handling high sums of money, you should be able to, figure out how to survive in a way that doesn't stress yourself. Okay. And I want to be specific to people who've handled high sums of money before. Okay, I'm not talking about just maybe you made a speech in front of a crowd once. I'm saying, like, if you've handled high sums of money, you should have optimized. So I want to make clear what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that that makes him financially invincible. I'm just talking about stress and self-confidence. It just should not have gotten to the point where it looks like he's afraid he'll be done irrevocable financial damage, and then he's just despondent to the point where he's making excuses and allowing his demons to take over. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Here's this. Here's the issue here specifically. So what am I gonna do with these? With the general issue, I'm just gonna cry out. What am I gonna do
I mean, really, this is an aggression segment. This will go on Chimoge's comments, and then I guess these both are, and then eventually there'll be a hand of God. But then I'm also gonna make other content based upon these. Obviously, this is part of a divination process. I'm still figuring out how the full divination process should use, but these will factor in somehow. Anyway, thank you very much. This has been a long one. See you guys next time. Please patronize my business. Thank you.